Now, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily the easiest business model, but you guys obviously notice that I do advertise my business, Cleaner Alliance, on my vlog series, and I talk about it quite a bit throughout the course of the vlog. But more specifically, you're probably wondering, how did I get started? And very simply, it started because I got onto some of the gig working platforms. Now, this isn't a strategy for becoming a gig worker per se, but I will admit that I did start as a platform type of contractor. So, for example, in the first 6 months of becoming a home service professional, I started out on TaskRabbit. Now on TaskRabbit, I ended up making, in the first couple months, $3,000 to $5,000 a month. For at the time, for me at that particular time or in that moment, when I was just a waiter, making like $15 plus $15 an hour in tips on the Hollywood Boulevard at the sushi restaurant, which you guys, I'll just put a video of me eating at my old sushi restaurant over at Hollywood. But for the most part, that point in my life, I worked at this particular sushi restaurant. And then now I was able to make, twice the amount of money going from being a wage type, minimum wage type, waiter, busser type of deal to somebody that's now able to make money for themselves as a home service professional. So that's how I got my start. Now, while I was working on TaskRabbit as a contractor, I learned the business basically. What's conventional, what's normal, how much are you supposed to charge somebody, how should you probably behave in general if you're going to be servicing homes and stuff like that. What are the potential pitfalls to hiring workers and stuff? So this is where I started to go from being a solopreneur, to being an entrepreneur. Before I was a waiter, in LA, I ended up being a solopreneur, media type, content creator type that ended up writing articles for a number of websites, making money based on the amount of views that they got or the amount of views that those articles got. Being a solopreneur came very easy to me, being a solo contractor that generally wrote articles on a contractor basis as a freelance author for a number of platforms. That was my solopreneur arc. Now, when I became a contractor for TaskRabbit, that's when I became somebody aware of the fact that there's actually money in this business, and I am beginning to I'm starting to get my foot in through the door. So this happened back in 2022 of March, okay? This is the very first time that I'd ever decided to get hired to go out and do any work in the service industry the way that it's structured currently, right? This would mean that I would tell you right now that the very first job that I ever did locally, I helped this girl move some furniture from her bottom stair all the way up to her second floor apartment with the help of another person. And I got paid $80 for that. It was a moving job. Made very little money. And at the time, I had no idea how much money I was gonna actually make from being a service worker and a service contractor in this business. Moving on, things got more complicated because while I did start out in 2022 as being, one of the contractors that use, platforms to get clients, there was a ceiling to that, meaning that on TaskRabbit, you can't really have worker crews. You can't hire people and then have them represent your profile or your brand on that platform. And so more often than not, I ended up figuring out a way to scale my organization before scaling the core business. And so I didn't realize that being a tasker meant that you were more or less a contractual employee without being a designated employee. So what happened there with TaskRabbit was that when they figured out that I was employing an organization underneath me to complete work, and that I wasn't reporting those workers and they had to be registered differently and all this other stuff, I realized that this platform is designed to give you a job like Uber or Lyft. They are not going to let you build an organization of workers underneath you so that you can go and complete work for that platform. So I automatically figured out that after making money with TaskRabbit, I achieved all these different designations that, more or less made me feel a little bit more prideful. I became an elite tasker. I figured out a way to make my best month on TaskRabbit was like $10,000 that month. And, for TaskRabbit, being a $10,000 a month TaskRabbit earner puts you at the top 1% of earners. So for the most part, I figured out the way of just, if you have the tools, you have the mobile applications, you can go out there and you can get leads and you can get the job done. But if you want to build a business, then in 2022, I had to make a different decision. In 2022, I used to live at the American Radio Network, okay? Yes, that's correct. The historical American Radio Network in Hollywood, where all the rock stars would sleep in a dorm together and hang out together along Hollywood and Sunset. You guys get the drift, right? So here's a quick photo of my really shitty looking studio. I was in Audition 1. That was the name of my unit, Audition 1. But while I was at the American Radio Network, while I was forming a strategy for growing my startup, right? Believe it or not, during that time, the American Radio Network was just an Airbnb hostel. So at the American Radio Network, I was the only media guy per se, because it's no longer the American Radio Network where they're broadcasting radio stations the way that they used to back in the 80s and 90s. So during that time, for this very brief moment, I kind of took over the entire radio broadcast station to kind of run my cleaning company out of it. And for a while, it worked really, really well. And I was able to scale my workforce of contractors and figure out different ways of acquiring customers from different platforms, from different methods and different approaches, because I was always constantly a go-getter. I would always work internally on myself, and then I would convince all the people around me, like, hey, dude, let's go make money together this way. So eventually, we got to a point in 2022 where I had a guy who would go and represent me on TaskRabbit, and we would funnel leads from TaskRabbit, even though it's against TaskRabbit policy. Hey, TaskRabbit, don't sue me. Please don't sue me. But I did do that. I did do that because there was no other way around it at the time. Maybe your policies are different or whatever, but usually when you start scaling into a bigger company and the platforms are there, they're not there to serve you to go and build a big ass business. They generally want you to be a small local contracting business that's dependent upon the platform, rather than being the guy that uses the platform and takes advantage of all the platforms and starts stuffing leads and clients from all directions into my business. This all happened in 2022, mind you. We're still living at the American Radio Network. I'm recruiting all my neighbors to get involved into this business. I basically convinced my Airbnb host even that this is a great business idea and that blah, blah, blah. Before you knew it, the whole entire building, all the neighbors were like, dude, it's this Cleaner Alliance. I just took the whole entire building over with the Cleaner Alliance stuff, right? And that's actually how it started. Late in October of 2022, I registered my California LLC. It was called Cleaner Alliance LLC. And then I registered the domain name in 2022 while living at the American Radio Network. While living at the American Radio Network, or what I call ARN, everything happened relatively quickly. And I'd lived there for a couple years and I just fell in love with it. But while I was there, the key was making sure that the principles that we had developed would transition into the next generation or the next iteration of the business Cleaner Alliance. So in 2023, I made the strategic decision to be less reliant on platform aggregators to generate our leads. Instead, I would go for paid acquisition channels that would allow me to scale my organization to make it bigger. So in 2023, we did just that. We had officially pivoted the strategy from poaching customers from other mobile apps to then building a website to then attracting customers directly to our storefront and dealing direct business with my company, my logo, and my brand. So that all happened between 2022 and 2023. During that time, in 2023, I had scaled up from being a local service brand represented by my first and last name to then creating what's now known as Cleaner Alliance. And at that particular moment, a lot of my friends that were kind of on board with me kind of went their separate way. We couldn't come to a consensus as to what we all wanted. So I was the founder, I was the owner of Cleaner Alliance. And for the most part, I would just hire people and they would work as contractors temporarily because they're music artists, they needed extra money to pay for small things or to pay for things in their life, For the most part, that transition was tough because while I was living at the American radio network, somebody had blown up the entire building and had lit the entire apartment building on fire.
Apartment fire in East Hollywood. The fire erupted early this morning in the 5200 block of West Sunset Boulevard. Firefighters doused the flames in about half an hour. Displaced tenants will be assisted by the American Red Cross. Thankfully, no injuries to report.
And it was in the news. And we just lost the American radio network. And, but they fixed it and it's back to where, it's a different version of a building now. Because of that, I had to change my strategy yet again. I wasn't living in the same environment and I didn't have the same group of friends and the same network of people that were mostly, working together with me. So I had to go off and do something else. Kinda. I ended up moving to different spots all throughout LA because I had to bounce around a little bit. I ended up having to pay for different Airbnb rooms, stay with a couple friends for a couple months at a time, sleep on some couches and stuff like that, sleep on some air mattresses even. This was all happening in 2023, mind you. And in that particular year, which was just last year, I went from bouncing to different Airbnbs to now moving into the apartment that I now live in. I went from having the lowest point of my month being $0 being made. Well, I wouldn't say $0, but it was less than a couple $1,000s because I was really distracted. My apartment had just burned down. My entire building burned down. And I was basically, dependent on some of my friends to let me transition to get by, Fast forward 6 months though, and I go from a slow grind of acquiring customers, getting to clean their properties, making a couple bucks here and there, to then suddenly grossing sales at about $25,000 to $30,000 sales $25,000 to $30,000 in a month. And that ended up being the peak month of 2023. So some of our months were doing really good and some of our months were doing not as good. And it really depends on the conditions that I'm dealing with right now. We go for the paid acquisition via search engines and we transition our model away from platforms because we want to build our own platform, which I'll talk about in the next part of this video. But we end up transitioning away from that. We're not I'm not a contractor that works for one of the gig applications that I just talked about and then says, hey guys, I have a 6-figure method of blah, blah, blah. I mean, it does work, but I'm talking about a journey of, going from that to then doing the next thing and then the next thing and then reaching the next level, right? In 2023, I figure I end up hiring another wave of contractors. These contractors generally found my business through local search. And I just gave people jobs left and right. I just gave them jobs and then I'd pay them, $30 to about $25 an hour to go out and complete the work that I told them to do. I figured that, even though I don't have I'm not living at the American radio network anymore, I still have myself. I still have my brand. I still have my brand property. And I still have the ability to go out and hustle and make some more money and make some really good decisions. So That's precisely what I did in 2023. I figured out a way to grow a new acquisition channel that was more congruent with the phase that we were in as a business. And that was a very, very transformative year. It's like I said, I scaled my business past a point where most people will never get to make that kind of money in a business. Through 2 years of being self-employed, starting from March of 2022, March 2023 went by, March of 2024 went by as well. And now we're running into August of 2024, where I'm recording this video right now. So I've been in business for my 3rd year. And in the 3rd year, things are different because I started to realize that depending just purely on search, it wasn't enough to get me to that next level. Now you might be saying, whoa, Alex, you just told me you went from making $30 an hour to now figuring out a way to make $30,000 in a month. And I'm like, yeah, in a span of 2 years. And I thought that was pretty good. But then I started thinking about, hey, what if I could increase the performance of my business? How can I get myself to a degree of having a competitive advantage over my peers that's even more definitive, more defined? So what I wanted to do this year was I spent more time on video content creation, creating video for my business. And I know that in this particular year,
Book an appointment on cleaneralliance.com.
I'm not going to make as much money as I did back in 2023. In fact, I'm anticipating that in terms of financial results, I'm going to take a hit for transitioning to video and media content. But then I started to say, okay, I'm starting to come to grips with that. Like I'm okay with sacrificing days where I could make money, like physical cold cash, hard cold cash, in order to have media and video content that I've always wanted to create, mind you. I've always wanted to create videos like this. I've always wanted to take the words that I used to type on a computer and turn it into something much more like this. So for me, I didn't even do a 50-50 split. Like I literally took all the time that I usually ordinarily spend on my cleaning business, and I kind of put that to the side, and I spent literally 90% of my time on YouTube right now. It's totally out of balance, but the key is, it's not about that. It's about making sure that I can produce better quality video, because I feel like the better quality video is going to reduce the acquisition cost for my leads. But more than that, it's going to drive the brand and story narrative needed to give investors added reassurance that investing into Cleaner Alliance would make a lot more sense than investing into other brands or other businesses. So arbitrarily, I thought to myself, okay, this isn't going to make me money. Sitting here in front of a camera, it's not producing me cash flow right now. And in the cases where I film myself working and then filming, I have to spend a lot of time setting up my gear and equipment and setting up shots while I'm working. So ultimately, no matter what I do with video, it seems like you're gonna have to take a hit financially, but then the returns are exponential down the road. And then on top of that, in this particular year, by investing more into video content, we're starting to notice that sometimes the leads that we're acquiring, I'm not spending as much money on lead acquisition. Well, I don't have to, because now I have all this content that I'm producing that leads back to my local company that people can then call and then get services from. So it's sort of like, if you put a lot of inputs into a new model that you're working on, and those new inputs that and I'm flooding, right? I'm flooding YouTube right now. It's literally an endless waterfall of content right now. And it's because I make the calculation that right now, in this particular season, I can spend less time on my service business, but still spend the time on the service business by focusing on video content. And even though the video content isn't gonna make the immediate ROI, I know for a fact that having a library of video content, having a library of raw clip after raw clips of me cleaning properties, me having access to properties, me having settings, different environments in which our service has been tested time and time again, and we record those videos, we create those content, we create those reels, we create those videos, our service brand is gonna look much different than all the other service brands. And not only is it gonna look different, it's gonna be more competitive, and we're gonna have even a bigger competitive advantage, a bigger competitive moat. But to further add to that fact this year, it's not just a year of, hey, my goal is to go from 30,000 a month to 5 million, 10 million a year. Our business isn't built to scale like that until we develop a mobile application. So now my energy is spent on developing a mobile application because we already have a web application, and our web application works really well for the book and call function and setting up appointments and calendar appointments for our contractors. But obviously, there's more room for improvement. There's more room for improvement. So what I spent the year doing this year is building my business so that it can go from doing 7 figures potentially to doing 8, 9 figures. So potentially getting to a point of doing over $1 billion in sales. And I think the key unlock to that is developing a mobile application. Developing mobile application and developing media brand that other brands don't have in my segment. So it costs money. It costs a lot of time. The return isn't that obvious. I know a lot of people are gonna quit trying to, they're not gonna run my type of business model and then suddenly figure it out one day. Oh, I'm gonna run a media model and a cleaning model at the same time. It's really hard to do that. Really hard. It's really hard to generate momentum around a service business model and a media product at the same time. You have to be really good at being a good media person, and then on top of that, you need to have good video skills, and then on top of that, you suddenly have the ability to be a professional contractor. You have years of experience under your belt dealing with clients, dealing with rejections, dealing with the potential catastrophes and the potential problems that could occur in this particular business. Very few people are in that unique situation. I found myself to be that person in that particular circumstance. So, I started out in 2022. 2023 was the financial transformative year. And in 2024, we've transitioned ourselves from being just a pure local service brand to being a media-driven brand. A media-driven brand that can create its own production of videos at such high quality, that it drives customers to our services, because there's going to be a huge difference in the relationships that people talk about with my business and the branding that I've created, the stories I've created with my customers and stuff like that. That becomes your definitive competitive advantage as a business. And when we've developed ourselves to a point where we can figure out a way to make money, we figured out ways to deliver services at much higher quality because we have really well-defined processes and systems in-house. We have years and years of experience in our local market, and we know how to deal with local laws and regulation. More than just that though, is how we've transitioned from each year. We've worked on our marketing channels. We've worked on the positioning of the business so that rather than it being mobile apps, rather than it being dependent on other businesses to refer leads to us, now we're professional advertisers driving leads to our business based upon the performance of our advertising, our marketing, and our creative and our campaigns, our organic content channels as well. So we've transitioned in year 3 to be an even more well-rounded, well-thought-out consumer brand. And I find it very, very exciting right now to be in this particular position where I'm working on building this thing to be not a 6-figure, not a 7-figure, but an 8 or 9-figure business. Like we're almost gonna be ready to talk about our mobile application in just January of 2025. In the 4th year of my business, I went from not having a business to making some money, like a local bank teller type of money, to then making money that a lot of people, influencers, would brag about. Oh, I made 6 figures from a business, and then they run out onto the internet and they're like, hey, look at all the money I made from my business. But my situation is unique. I'm not a content creator. I'm not a new content creator. I've been creating content for a decade. I'm not a new YouTuber. I had to start up YouTube again with a new channel, but even then, this restart to my YouTube, it's fairly consistent and it's growing relatively quickly as well. So what gets me excited about my business is that I started from nothing, from a job that I had to recover from after closing a business. And in this particular business, we went from not having any momentum to then developing a phenomenal product to developing a stable, a stable service that has access to its own technology, and we develop our own technology in-house, we develop our own processes in-house, we develop our own brand and marketing in-house. Isn't that what a company does? I had built a company in just 3 years. And it's beyond just the metrics, beyond just the numbers. It's the people that got involved with my company. It's the workers that got involved and worked for me for the past couple of years. It's the people that actually believed in me as a local business. That's what I'm saying. It can happen for you. If you get started. If you get started and you work really hard, you can build a real business. What I mean by a real business is a business that feels like one. You're building brand, you're building product, you're modifying product, you're marketing, you're dealing with direct sales, you're dealing with customer support, you're dealing with online reviews, you're dealing with refunds, you're dealing with employees and their complaints, you're dealing with things that are more complicated that continue to hit your desk day in and day out, demanding your attention. The truth of the matter is, I honestly think I wouldn't be a YouTuber right now if it wasn't for the fact that I had developed a business and I could scale my business and grow it to the size that it's at. And then on top of that, I think it can grow to a much larger size. And I get to talk about this story that I'm building live on YouTube. With each episode that I upload, you get to watch a story play out about a service company that goes on to become a multi-million-dollar technology company. And I think it's already worth millions of dollars. And I think it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars in the future. The key is, though, is that this story that I'm building around this is not possible unless I work on it while the story is unfolding. And because we're dealing in reality and reality type television, it's leaning heavily onto my ability to journalize or to be a journalist. Thankfully, though, I have a journalism background. So I have a background in journalism. So being able to journal progress, while it is costly, while it is time consuming, while it does require you to do more work, I think people will want to tune into this show more than a lot of other shows right now, because it's real, it's authentic, it's not made up stuff. And I honestly believe that when you look at a lot of the online content on YouTube right now, it's regurgitated. There's nothing differentiated or unique about some of the stuff that's going on lately. I think a lot of the stuff that's on YouTube is fake. And then there's a lot of people trying really hard to kind of like create this narrative that's not real about themselves. Whereas in my case, I could just kind of talk about what's happening as it's happening. And that's interesting for people. Because rather than me sitting here and talking about stuff that I don't know how to do or don't want to do or don't know anything about, instead you only get to hear me talk about topics that I'm an expert, that I'd like to do something, that I can explain to you how I did something based upon my own formalized experiences. Those are the types of videos that really stand out. And that's my goal here, is that I don't want to create videos that sound like the same type of jargonated, nonsensical content that doesn't really do anything to serve the broader YouTube community, but mostly it's just there to serve the egos of of a particular group of content creators that have figured out a way to beat the algorithm but not reach the hearts of people at the same time. And my goal here isn't just, to be an algorithm jock. Some of the moves I make publishing YouTube content is not really geared towards, optimization. It's geared towards building a relationship with my future customers and my future stakeholders. That's why I created a YouTube channel. Everything else is secondary to that. Everything else doesn't really matter other than the fact that I can develop a relationship with future customers and I can develop a relationship with future stakeholders, and then I can also express my creativity, have an outlet for that. And all three of those things, well, there is a financial reason for doing what I'm doing. It's not very easy to quantify any of that. And that's the thing I want to point out to you guys in a creative career, is that sometimes you want data, you want numbers, you want metrics, you want different things to justify what you're doing or why you're doing it. But sometimes the reasons for why you're doing something stems more from strategy and intuitively recognizing that, hey, I should still do this additional added activity and get it going. Because if I don't, that will be a huge weakness in my business. That will be a huge hole in my strategy. So that's why we're here today talking about how I'm scaling Cleaner Alliance from a 6-figure to a 7-figure company. And in this particular arc where I start my YouTube channel, the 6-figure to 7-figure transition of a conventional service business model tied with the implementation of new technologies and the inclusion and the deployment of those technologies to make it all come together is going to take a lot of work. A lot of work. I feel like I can handle that. I feel like I can handle the fact that at the very minimum, we can go out there, we can create that 7-figure business, we can launch the mobile application, and we can continue to build more momentum while continuing to scale our media, scale the media around the business, and scale my own personal brand at the same time. So oftentimes I see people, they fall into two groups. They're either exclusionary or inclusionary. Exclusionary thinkers think in terms of how if they can diminish and say and do as little as possible and only focus on those small, limited set of inputs that they think will drive the most results. Whereas, in my case, I do the opposite. It's not about focusing on a small set of inputs that drive results and saying no to everything else. Instead, what I want to do is, I want to do everything all at the same time and put all the inputs to be as inclusionary as possible. So think of it this way. It's the difference between a person that strips everything down and only focuses on a couple things versus the big company that can take on the totality of a lot of different things at the same time. So inclusionary thinking is, how can I do X, Y, Z, and E at the same exact time? It means being able to stagger different things and different events that are occurring at the same exact time and having all of those events occur correctly at the same time. So that's time management level 303, right? So I like to think inclusionary. So what I just talked to you guys about is all the things that our business had done, but now we added one more thing that we have to do all at the same time. And then when we add another thing, that's 3 things we have to do, and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 15 and hundreds and thousands of different activities happening all at the same time. So inclusionary thinking forces you to think about a way to do all the work or more work within the same amount of time without any compromise. So that's inclusionary. Exclusionary is thinking of ways to cut things out, to remove things so that you can only focus on a few of the other things. That's exclusionary, and it's limiting. Because if you really think about it, a business is about doing a lot of things well at the same time. It's not about doing a small set of things particularly well. Those businesses fail all the time. Those businesses, like there are so many illustrative examples of single product companies or single single whatever companies that only are so singularly focused, so exclusionary in how they're thinking, that they're not inclusive. They're not inclusive thinkers. So as soon as something in their strategy breaks, as I scaled my business, I was able to be more inclusive. Inclusiveness means doing more things at the same time. It means that, for example, before I might have only marketed my way a certain way. Now we have 15 different marketing channels that lead back to our business. So it's being able to do more things at the same time. It's not exclusionary, it's inclusionary, meaning that it's not do this or that and limit the other option and say no to that and only do this. That type of thinking tends to apply when you're optimizing for a limited set. But a business is a fluid organism. It has to be able to do a lot of things at the same time extremely well. And that means that you have to be more inclusive with your thinking, meaning that you have to be able to contain more activity in the same space. It means that you're able to lead and organize and structure an activity that's more complicated, that has more moving pieces and parts to it, all happening at the same time, like in a sort of staccato rhythm of like an orchestra as it kind of moves the pieces and the components to make it work inside of a business. Businesses like mine are much more labor intensive as well, meaning that I have to conduct an orchestra of people, and then I also have to use a lot of technology and advanced advertising tools and analytics and strategies and programming methods to get those customers to come back to me. AKA, you're the conductor of an orchestra when you actually have a real business. You have people that play different instruments and different parts as a part of the assembly. You have different pieces and parts moving all at the same time when you're conducting an organization of people that are actually doing things for you. So it becomes more important that as you scale your company up, that you're able to take on more projects and do them concurrently at the same time. Meaning that it's not just you decided that the business is arbitrarily going to expand service products, say for example. So let's say for example, I decide to launch a new service this year, and that service is gonna generate, less money than probably the other services that I market on my website. But that's still inclusionary. With inclusionary thinking, it means that I can do those other things. They might not make as much of an impact initially, but as a company, I want to be inclusionary, meaning that we do more things at the right time and we add more pieces and parts to it that allows us to kind of expand the orchestra per se. So now, if you're managing an orchestra, right? But basically, when you're managing an orchestra, there's a lot of moving parts. And then when the orchestra gets bigger, you might add like a drum set back there, and then you'll throw the cymbals and then a flute player over here. That's how a company is kind of managed. You kind of have to expand the orchestra so that there's different pieces and instruments coming into the business so that the business is able to play its music correctly, so that the orchestra is able to perform correctly. And then you as the conductor in front of your orchestra has to kind of manage the tempo, the pace, and the staccato and the cadence of the orchestra so that the business can thrive. I know it doesn't sound like the most beautiful illustration, but sometimes I can just go straight to music and it makes a lot of sense to me. So when you're organizing a business, in the initial stages, simplification is a tool so that you can simplify and focus on the things that might get the business up and going. But as you get your business up and going and it gets bigger and bigger, it becomes more a factor of being inclusive, inclusionary, so that your business can expand its ability to do more things horizontally at the same time and vertically at the same time. So it can increase volume of activity down a singular function. Vertically, it's able to do more volume of a function because you have more people doing the same task. And then horizontally, you're able to categorically do a broader number of things as a business. That's the inclusionary aspect that a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't have it. That's when I know immediately. You're not an entrepreneur. You're an employee that has filed a business entity. I own an LLC. I work for myself. I'm a boss and I only do these particular things and I don't do anything else. Okay, you're an employee with a business entity. You're not train conducting anything other than yourself, realistically speaking. If that's who you came to be, you went from being an employee at a company to then developing yourself to be another employee in your own business, to behave the same way as an employee at a business that you used to work, you're gonna fail. Exclusionary thinking is important when you're initially scaling, so you only have to prioritize the things that matter so that you can get to point B and point C. Sure, exclusionary thinking still matters, but when you're building a company has to do a lot of things at the same time. So you have to build a business that's able to do a lot of things at the same time. And in order to do that, you're gonna have to become better at managing people, better at using technology, and better at communicating. And I don't think there's a compromise to that. I don't think it's like a situation where you can, pretend, in front of people. I see a lot of pretenders. They're like, hey, I run a business. And then it turns out that they're a solopreneur. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. You're a solopreneur. I want nothing to do with you. I want absolutely nothing to do with a solopreneur. I've been a solopreneur for 7 or 8 years. I graduated from being a solopreneur, and I don't want to go back to being one. Put it that way. So when I run into solopreneurs, I put them into that bucket and I say, hey, look, that's great that you have these strategies and these tactics for managing your time so you can limit your effort and focus on areas that seem important. That's cool, but you're not running a company. You're not running a company. You're an employee that knows how to manage your own time, working out of a business entity that you created for yourself. Okay? That's solopreneur. And you have not graduated to a point where you're able to conduct a business where people can see the output, the outcome. Now, there are still things going on in my business that are happening in parallel right now. In parallel, meaning that not only am I on camera recording myself making a video, but there are other activities in my business that are going off right now that I am not doing, someone else is doing, or that there's some sort of technology that's that's serving that piece of the business. Meaning that layer by layer, the more complicated a company gets, the more activity it generates in a given space of time. And so the business becomes more and more complex, and it becomes more like managing an orchestra. So that's why I tell people that give off this, I'm a college graduate with a business degree. I'm an employee that knows how to manage businesses. I don't think so. I think you're an educated person that studied business that is geared to be an employee until you learn how to run your own business or run other businesses. And getting to that point is really hard because nobody's just gonna let you go out and just build your business, your organization without you having to fight, struggle, and kind of scramble for it. And then once you get to that point where people are able to look at you and say, hey, look, that guy owns a company and it behaves more like a company and less like a solo operation. There's just one guy just running a business or something in his basement somewhere. It can't be like that. And that's not the origin of how Cleaner Alliance started. It started because of a community of close friends and people that I had built up that had helped me build this business, And then now we're working on even more higher level, more complex, more difficult tasks. Tasks that internet marketers have no business talking about. Like you need to level up your game another level. Learn how to make a mobile app because that's where I'm focused on. That's what I'm focused on. And then it's going to have to come out in 6 months, and me and my lead software developer will be stuck working, and then I'm going to be stuck working on a mobile app, working on my YouTube videos and my content strategy on YouTube, while also working on the functions of my business, building out a better web application, building out better things going out onto the field even, where my contractors are performing better because they're implementing better processes and tools and equipment. I really, really control my business, and I work really, really hard on it, on every level of it, so that we know that everything that's going on at the same time is done perfectly or at the best level we possibly can. And if there are people harassing and agonizing us over this, well, we have legal processes. We have legal teams. We have investigative teams. We have recording. We have equipment to discriminate against people, and we even have evidence. We produce our own evidence that's indisputable to fight back against. We have processes. We developed a business basically, right? That's what I'm encouraging people to do. Create a business. Be real. Be authentic. Be yourself. If there's anything you can do, I'd also recommend is just be real. Be authentic. Be true to yourself. Be true in front of other people. Over time, it may not feel like it. They might not like you, but they'll start to respect you. They'll start to respect you, and then you'll earn the admiration of people. Very simply. First, they'll laugh at you. First, they'll make fun of you, and then they'll start to critique you, and then eventually, they start to admire. So the point of the matter is, do what it takes to get started, but don't stay at that level. Don't stay at the level of a happily self-employed solopreneur. Try to figure out ways to reach the next pillar ever so gradually in your company so that you can start scaling your organization. You have human capital, technology capital, and economic capital, all these other factors, all these factors working in your favor. That's why I don't, that's why I don't take a lot of people at their word. You seem like a guy that has a job. You say you have all these numbers and stuff like that. I don't believe you. The way you're describing yourself, it seems like you're not who you say you are. There's a lot of things that I can just use to filter information and people out. You can tell that I'm being pretty authentic and real with you guys when I talk to you about my experiences managing employees, managing workers in my business, managing the technology, managing mobile app deployments, managing the direct advertising and the advertising placements. So guys, I figured I said pretty much what I've wanted to say for this particular episode. I feel like I'm at a point where I can talk openly about my business, provide advice, and then talk about what I'm doing myself personally, I don't want to position myself like the guru. There are moments where I do behave like a guru, but I don't want to be just a guru to you guys. I want to be somebody that you can watch the things that I do, that at least there's some entertainment value beyond the educational and the informational value that I put out there. Ultimately, the world is about making money, and then at the same time, it's not always about making money at the same time as well, You can take everything I just said for a grain of salt. I really wouldn't care. I really wouldn't care. You could be the tax accountant with a local CPA office that just wants to stay small. And so by staying small and lying to everybody about how big you are, you've basically pigeonholed yourself into a corner. Some people do that. Some people really do corner themselves in a way that it just makes no sense. Like, how are you going to get out of that situation if all you're ever doing is working a job as a business, and then you're not doing anything outside of your ordinary behavioral activity of, providing services to then build a business that can expand and provide more services. So some people, they're going to stay the same. They're going to exclude a lot of things, and they're only going to focus on a narrow set of things that they think will help them survive. So eventually the business becomes a means of survival for them, and it becomes like a local small business type of deal where you wonder why, there's these small business owners everywhere you go where they're really jaded. Jaded more than anything else because they work a job and then they slap an LLC on top of it and tell themselves that they're an entrepreneur. And I'm asking you to stop being a solopreneur and start working on your inner game. Start working on your inner game so you can elevate to being a real entrepreneur and having options open to you because you create options. You create opportunities by being more inclusionary and by welcoming more people in. That's being inclusionary. It's what gives people that sense of safety and comfort being inside of a business or a group or an organization. You've got to be more inclusionary if you want to build a bigger business and a bigger brand. And I know sometimes it's not always that simple, guys. Sometimes it's not, which is why I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you guys so much. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and be sure to watch some of my older videos as well, because we have plenty of entertainment, informational value. I hope you guys will continue to stick around. Take care.